Hello everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you've decided to join me here tonight. We're about to begin a quiet journey into a world that is always around us, but one we so rarely stop to truly see. Tonight, we are going to get to know a single remarkable organism, a tree. Not just any tree, but one that has been standing sentinel on this continent for millennia. It's a tree of life, in more ways than one. The Eastern White Cedar. It's a humble giant, an ancient soul that holds the stories of seasons and centuries in its very wood. It's always a pleasure to share these stories with you. If you find some peace and wonder in what we do here, and only if you genuinely do, perhaps consider a quiet click on the like or subscribe button. It just lets me know that these journeys are helping you find your way to rest. And as we begin to settle in, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. It's a beautiful thought, all of us, scattered across the globe, under different stars, but connected for a little while by our shared curiosity for the natural world. Now, though, the time for that is done. The day is over. It's time to let the world outside this quiet space just fade away. So find that perfect, comfortable spot. Let your head grow heavy on your pillow. Close your eyes if you feel ready. Take a slow, deep breath in. And as you exhale, release everything you've been carrying. All the thoughts, the plans, the worries. Just let them go. Let them drift. We are about to shrink down, to slow down, to the patient, silent timescale of the trees. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Scent of Ages. An introduction to the Eastern White Cedar. Imagine we are walking together. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. The path we are on is soft underfoot, a carpet of fallen pine needles and moss. We are in a forest, but it's a special kind of forest. The light here is different. It's dappled and green, filtered through a canopy that seems to be woven, not just grown. And as we walk deeper, a new scent begins to fill the air. It's clean, sharp, and deeply resinous. It's a fragrance that speaks of ancient things, of preservation, of a quiet and profound vitality. It is the scent of the Eastern White Cedar, Thuja Occidentalis, the Arborvitae, the tree of life. Before we even get close enough to touch one, we can see their collective presence. They don't tower with the brute ambition of an oak or a pine. Their silhouette is more modest, almost conical, like a soft green flame rising from the forest floor. In a dense grove, they press together, their branches interlocking, creating a space that feels like a cathedral. The walls are living, breathing columns of wood and foliage, and the ceiling is a mosaic of green that hushes the wind and softens the sunlight. There is a feeling of sanctuary here, a deep and abiding peace that these trees cultivate just by existing. They are not boisterous organisms. They are masters of a quiet, enduring patience. Let's step off the path and approach one of them. Choose any one. It doesn't have to be the largest or the oldest. Every single one is a masterpiece of biological engineering. As we get closer, the first thing we notice, long before our hands make contact, is the trunk. The bark of the Eastern White Cedar is not like the rugged, plate-like armor of a pine or the smooth, pale skin of a birch. It is something else entirely. It is a tapestry of fibers. The color is a soft, reddish-brown, like dried clay or cinnamon, but it is weathered by the years to a silvery gray in long vertical streaks. It looks less like a solid casing and more like a covering woven from countless threads. Run your hand over it, gently. You'll feel that it's not rough, not in an abrasive way. It's soft. It peels away in long, thin, fibrous strips that feel like dry, soft rope. You could pull a piece off, and it would come away like a ribbon of wood, flexible and surprisingly strong. This isn't dead material. It's a history book. Each shred, each fiber, is a record of growth, of a season of rain, or a month of drought. Underneath these peeling strips, the new bark is smoother, with a warmer, more vibrant color. It's the living, growing layer, protected by this shaggy, insulating coat. Look closer still. The fissures and cracks in the bark are not just empty spaces, they are entire ecosystems in miniature. Tiny spiders spin their imperceptible webs, seeking shelter from the wind. Small insects, beetles and ants, use these vertical crevices as highways, moving up and down the trunk on their mysterious errands. And clinging to the bark itself, you will almost always find life. Patches of moss, in shades of emerald and lime, create soft, velvety cushions that hold on to the rain long after a storm has passed. These little islands of green thrive on the stable surface the cedar provides. And then there are the lichens. Beautiful, slow-growing organisms, a partnership between a fungus and an alga. They form circular patterns of pale green, grey, and sometimes a faint, dusty orange. They look like splashes of ancient paint, a testament to the purity of the air and the sheer amount of time this tree has been standing here, patiently allowing other life to make a home upon its body. This bark is not just a shield, it's a foundation, a vertical landscape upon which countless smaller lives play out their entire existence. It's a testament to nature's frugality, where no surface is wasted, and every structure provides an opportunity for another. Now, let your gaze travel upward, following the trunk as it rises. You'll see the main stem divide, not into massive sprawling limbs, but into a more delicate and intricate system of branches. The entire structure seems designed to create a dense, almost impenetrable screen of foliage. And it is this foliage that is perhaps the most defining characteristic of the cedar. Unlike a pine with its sharp needles, or a maple with its broad open leaves, the cedar's foliage is made of scales, tiny, overlapping green scales, pressed flat against the stem. If you look at a single branchlet, you'll see that it's not round but flattened, creating a fan-like spray. It looks like a piece of delicate woven fabric, or the intricate pattern of a fern frond. Each tiny scale is a leaf, a miniature solar panel, perfectly angled to capture what light filters down through the canopy. Nature, in its role as a master engineer, has opted for efficiency here. These small, waxy scales are excellent at conserving water, a crucial adaptation for surviving both the frozen droughts of winter and the dry heat of summer. Let's reach out and touch one of these flattened sprays. The texture is unique. It's soft but with a slightly waxy, almost reptilian feel. It's flexible, yielding to your touch. It doesn't prickle or scratch. It feels cool and alive. Now gently cup a small spray in your hand and crush it. Don't break the branch, just gently bruise the leaves between your fingers. And now bring your hand to your face and inhale. This is the soul of the tree. The scent that was faint on the air is now immediate, powerful, and incredibly complex. It's the smell of pure, concentrated life. Scientists would tell you that you are smelling a cocktail of volatile organic compounds, chiefly a molecule called Thuja. But that clinical description does a disservice to the experience. It's a scent that is both sharp and clean, like citrus, but with none of the sweetness. There's a powerful note of resin, the deep, woody perfume of the forest itself. Some people detect a hint of pineapple, or camphor, or even green apple. It's a fragrance of preservation. It's the smell that gives cedar chests their power to repel moths, the quality that makes the wood so resistant to rot. This beautiful aroma is not an accident. It is a form of defense. It is the tree's chemical armor. For millions of years, this potent fragrance has deterred insects that would seek to devour its leaves and discourage browsing animals like deer from making it a meal. It is a declaration, spoken in a language of molecules that says, "I am here, I will endure, and I will protect myself." To us, it is a refreshing, clean, and invigorating scent. To a hungry caterpillar, it is a bitter warning. And so we find this beautiful paradox. The very thing that we find so welcoming and peaceful is for others a chemical wall. It is a reminder that in nature, beauty and function are often one and the same. Let's stay with this scent for a moment. Breathe it in deeply. It's a smell that seems to clear the mind. It connects us to something ancient, something that has been part of this landscape since long before the first humans walked here. This is the scent that would have filled the air in the great evergreen forests that followed the retreat of the glaciers. It's a fragrance that is woven into the very fabric of this continent's history. It's the scent of resilience. Now let's consider where these remarkable trees choose to live. They are not picky, but they have their preferences, and their form changes dramatically depending on their home. We are in a gentle, mixed wood forest now, where life is relatively easy. Here the cedars grow straight and tall, competing for light, reaching for the sky in that classic conical shape. But this is only one of their many homes. Let's transport ourselves, just for a moment, to a very different place. Picture the Niagara Escarpment, a great limestone cliff that carves its way across the landscape. Here the wind is relentless. In winter, it is a brutal scouring force, carrying ice and snow. In summer, the sun beats down on the exposed rock. The soil is almost non-existent, just a shallow dusting in the cracks and fissures of the limestone. It is a place that seems hostile to life, a vertical desert of stone. And yet, here they are, the Eastern White Cedars. But they are not the tall, symmetrical trees of the forest floor. They are transformed. Here they are ancient acrobats, contortionists of the plant world. They cling to the cliff face, their roots worming their way deep into the rock, finding purchase in the smallest of cracks. Their trunks are not straight, but gnarled and twisted, sculpted by centuries of wind into fantastic shapes. They look like natural bonsai, every twist and turn of their branches telling a story of struggle and survival. Some of them are barely taller than a person, yet they are among the oldest living things in eastern North America. Scientists have found cedars on these cliffs that are over 1,000 years old. Imagine that. 1,000 years, a tree that was a young sapling when Vikings were landing on the shores of Newfoundland. A tree that was already ancient when the first European settlers arrived. It has stood on this cliff face through 1,000 winters, 1,000 summers, silently watching the world change below. It has endured droughts that lasted for decades, ice storms that would have shattered lesser trees, and the endless, patient force of the wind. To call them survivors is a profound understatement. They are masters of endurance. They grow with excruciating slowness, sometimes adding less than a millimeter of girth to their trunk in a year. Their wood becomes incredibly dense, hard, and resilient. Each growth ring, when viewed under a microscope, is a detailed diary entry. A wide ring tells of a good year, with plenty of rain and sun. A narrow, compressed ring tells of a year of hardship, a cold spring, a summer drought. By studying these rings, a science called dendrochronology, researchers can reconstruct the climate of the past, reading the stories that these silent wooden librarians have been faithfully recording for centuries. Here, on the cliff face, the cedar teaches us about tenacity. It demonstrates that life can flourish in the most unlikely of places, not through brute strength, but through a patient, yielding resilience. It doesn't fight the wind, it bends with it. It doesn't demand rich soil, it makes a home in the cracks of the rock. It is a profound lesson in adaptation, a living monument to the power of perseverance. The scent of its foliage when you find it here seems even more potent, a concentrated essence of its will to live. Now, let's leave the harsh, windswept world of the cliff and travel to another of the cedar's preferred homes, one that is in many ways the complete opposite. Let's imagine ourselves standing at the edge of a boreal bog. The air here is perfectly still. The silence is so deep it feels like a presence. The water at our feet is dark, the color of strong tea, stained by the tannins leaching from the sphagnum moss that forms a spongy living carpet over everything. This is a world of acid and water, low in oxygen and poor in nutrients. It is a place of preservation, where the normal processes of decay happen in slow motion. And here too, we find the Eastern White Cedar. They often grow in dense, nearly impenetrable thickets, creating what are sometimes called cedar swamps. The ground beneath them is a treacherous, tangled web of roots and moss-covered hummocks. The air is heavy with humidity, and that same characteristic cedar scent, now mingled with the damp, peaty smell of the bog. The trees here are different again. They are often tall and slender, with thin trunks, reaching for the light in the crowded swamp. Their bases are often flared out, providing stability in the soft, unstable ground. Their root systems are not deep, because there is no oxygen in the deep peat. Instead, they spread out wide and shallow, a subterranean network just beneath the moss, anchoring them in the bog. To survive here, the cedar has to be a master chemist. The acidic water makes it difficult for roots to absorb essential nutrients. But the cedar has formed partnerships, symbiotic relationships with fungi in the soil. These fungi, the mycelial network, act as an extension of the tree's own root system, able to break down and access nutrients that the tree cannot get on its own. In return, the tree provides the fungi with sugars, the product of its photosynthesis. It is a silent, underground partnership, a form of ancient commerce that allows both organisms to thrive in this challenging environment. Walking through a cedar swamp is like stepping into another world. The light is dim and green. The sounds of the outside world are muffled. The ground gives slightly under your feet. It feels timeless, primeval. You can see fallen trees that have been lying in the acidic water for centuries, perfectly preserved, their wood still sound. The same chemistry that protects the living tree from decay continues to protect it long after it has fallen. This is why cedar wood is so prized for things that must endure the elements: shingles, fences, canoes. The tree's own life-preserving chemistry is a gift it leaves behind. Here in the bog, the cedar teaches us about community, about the intricate and often invisible connections that sustain life. It shows us how survival is not just about individual strength, but about forming alliances, about creating systems that can overcome the limitations of the environment. From the cliff face to the bog, this single species shows an incredible range of adaptability. It is a testament to the deep genetic wisdom that it carries within it. Whether on a cliff or in a swamp, the cedar's life cycle continues its quiet, patient rhythm. In the spring, the tree produces tiny, almost unnoticeable cones. The male cones are small and yellowish, and they release vast clouds of pollen into the wind. It's a fine, golden dust that settles over everything, a hopeful, airborne fleet carrying the tree's genetic future. The female cones are even smaller at first, reddish-purple and looking like tiny closed flower buds. If a grain of pollen lands on one, a process of slow and steady creation begins. Over the summer, the female cone matures. It grows into the familiar shape of a cedar cone, but it's still remarkably delicate. It's about 1/2 inch long, slender and oblong, made of a few overlapping wooden scales. It stands upright on the branchlet, like a tiny wooden tulip. Inside each scale, protected from the world, a seed begins to form. By autumn, the cone has turned a light brown. On a dry, breezy day, its scales will flex and open, and from within, the seeds are released. Each one is unimaginably small and light, equipped with 2 tiny paper-thin wings. They are not designed to fly far, but to be carried by the wind, to flutter and spin their way down to the forest floor, or into a crack in the rock, or onto a cushion of moss. The vast majority of these seeds will never become trees. They will be eaten by birds or small mammals. They will land in places where they cannot germinate. They will fail to get the light or water they need. The cedar plays a game of immense numbers, producing millions of seeds over its lifetime, in the hope that just 1 or 2 will find the perfect spot, take root, and grow to become a tree that will, in its turn, continue the cycle. It is a strategy of immense, unthinking optimism. It is nature's way of ensuring that life, against all odds, will find a way to continue. And so we see the cedar, not just as a static object, but as a living, breathing process. It is a photosynthesizing machine, turning sunlight into sugar. It is a chemical factory, producing aromatic oils for defense. It is a hydraulic pump, drawing water up from its roots to its highest leaves. It is a historian, recording the climate in its rings. It is a landlord, providing a home for countless other species. And it is a parent, creating and dispersing the seeds of the next generation. It does all of this in silence, on a time scale that is difficult for our fast-paced minds to comprehend. We live our lives in days and weeks and years. The cedar lives in decades and centuries and millennia. It stands as a quiet rebuke to our own impatience, a reminder that the most profound and enduring things are often the slowest to grow. When you stand in a grove of these ancient trees, you are in the presence of something that has mastered the art of being. It does not strive, it does not hurry, it simply is. It is rooted in the earth, reaching for the sky, and in its wood, it holds the memory of time itself. The name given to it by early botanists, Arborvitae, was no accident. It is Latin for tree of life. They recognized in its evergreen nature, its resistance to decay, and its incredible longevity, a powerful symbol of vitality and eternity. It's easy to see how this one real tangible organism, this tough aromatic adaptable tree from the cliffs and bogs of North America, could become the blueprint for a universal symbol. Its flattened, woven sprays of foliage speak of connection and community. Its ancient gnarled forms speak of wisdom and time. Its life-preserving scent speaks of an incorruptible spirit. It is in every sense a tree that embodies the relentless, patient and beautiful persistence of life. So as we prepare to drift off to sleep, let the image of this tree settle in your mind. Picture its fibrous reddish-brown bark. Imagine the feeling of its soft, scale-like leaves. And most of all, recall its clean, sharp and ancient scent. Let that fragrance fill your senses, a scent of peace, of resilience, and of deep, quiet time. This is the Eastern White Cedar, a silent witness, a patient teacher, and a true tree of life. Allow its story to be the landscape of your dreams tonight. Rest well. Chapter 2: The Patient Machine. The deep biology of Thuja occidentalis. That scent of peace, of resilience, of deep, quiet time. Let it linger in your awareness as we continue our journey, because that fragrance is not just a pleasant aroma, it is a broadcast, an announcement from the very core of the tree's being. It is the exhalation of a life lived on a different time scale, a life governed by a profound and unwavering patience. To understand the Eastern White Cedar, we must move past its shape and silhouette and venture inside. We must shrink ourselves down, past the bark, past the wood, into the humming, silent, microscopic world where this patience is engineered. This is the world of the patient machine. Imagine for a moment the rhythm of your own body, the steady beat of your heart, the constant in and out of your breath. It is a rhythm of urgency, of rapid consumption and expenditure. Our lives are a brilliant, frantic sprint, but the cedar is the ultimate endurance athlete. It is a life lived as a marathon spanning centuries, and its entire biology is tuned to this reality. Its metabolism, the fundamental engine of its life, is set to a profoundly slow tempo. It does not burn through its resources with reckless abandon. Instead, it sips, it savors. Where we might see a roaring bonfire of energy, the cedar maintains a single, steady pilot light. This slow metabolic rate is the cedar's first and most crucial secret to longevity. In the often harsh, nutrient-poor and windswept places it calls home, the limestone cliffs, the swampy fens, a fast metabolism would be a death sentence. It would be like trying to run a car on fumes. The cedar, instead, has perfected the art of frugality. It measures out its energy reserves with the precision of an ancient apothecary, allocating just enough for growth, just enough for defense, just enough for reproduction, and always keeping a vast store in reserve. It is a strategy born of deep time, a wisdom encoded in its very DNA. It understands that in the great race of life, the prize does not always go to the swift, but often to the one who simply endures. And this endurance is built, quite literally, from the ground up, at the level of its most basic components. Let's drift deeper into the cellular architecture of the wood itself. If you could hold a cross-section of cedar wood in your hand, you would feel its surprising lightness, its fine, even grain. But what you are holding is a masterpiece of biological engineering, a city of cells built to last 1,000 years. Each cell is a microscopic room, and its walls are not made of simple membrane, but are fortified with two remarkable substances, cellulose and lignin. Cellulose provides the fundamental structure, like the steel rebar in a skyscraper. It is a long chain of sugar molecules, linked together to form incredibly strong fibers. These fibers give the wood its tensile strength, its ability to bend in the wind without breaking. But it is the lignin that truly transforms the wood into a fortress. Lignin is nature's own miraculous concrete. It is a complex, sprawling, three-dimensional polymer that infiltrates the spaces between the cellulose fibers, binding them together into an immensely strong and rigid matrix. Unlike the orderly chains of cellulose, lignin is chaotic, irregular, and this is its genius. This very randomness makes it incredibly difficult for the enzymes of bacteria and fungi to break down. It presents no simple, repeating pattern to attack. It is a chemical puzzle with no easy solution. This is why cedar is so famously resistant to rot. The tree is not just living, it is actively embalming itself as it grows, infusing its own structure with a substance that defies decay. It is building its own monument, cell by patient cell. Now, let's travel within this cellular city. We find two distinct parallel transportation systems, two networks that are the very definition of life in motion, however slow. These are the xylem and the phloem. The xylem is the plumbing that brings water up from the roots, but to call it plumbing is an almost comical understatement. It is a silent, passive, and utterly brilliant system that operates without a single moving part, without a pump or a heart. It is a vast collection of microscopic, hollow tubes, the fossilized remains of dead cells, linked end to end. These tubes run in unbroken columns from the deepest root hair all the way to the tip of the highest leaf, and through them water ascends, pulled upward by a force born of the sun and the air. As water evaporates from the tiny pores on the cedar's scale-like leaves, a process called transpiration, it creates a tension, a negative pressure that pulls on the entire column of water below it. It is like sipping from an immensely long, infinitesimally thin straw. The water molecules themselves, bound to each other by the subtle magic of cohesion, are pulled upward in an unbroken chain, a quiet, invisible river, flowing against gravity, day after day, year after year. It is a process so silent you could press your ear to the trunk for a lifetime and never hear it, yet it is as powerful and essential as the rushing of a mighty river. It carries with it the dissolved minerals from the soil, the raw materials that the tree will transform into life. Running parallel to this silent upward river is the phloem. If the xylem is the water main, the phloem is the grocery delivery service. It is a network of living cells that transports the sugars, the food created in the leaves during photosynthesis, to every other part of the tree that needs it. To the growing tips, to the expanding trunk, and down to the deepest roots, which live in perpetual darkness and depend entirely on this sweet subsidy from above. Unlike the one-way street of the xylem, the phloem is a dynamic, two-way system. It can direct nutrients wherever they are most needed, responding to the changing seasons and the tree's own internal directives. In the spring, it might send sugars upward to fuel the growth of new leaves. In the autumn, it will send them downward to be stored in the roots for the long winter ahead. It is the tree's circulatory system, a slow, sugary pulse that sustains the entire organism. As we drift through the cross-section of the trunk, we notice a profound change in color and texture as we move toward the center. We are passing from the sapwood to the heartwood. The outer layers, the sapwood, are the living, active part of the trunk. This is where the xylem and phloem are hard at work. It is pale, moist, and physiologically busy. But as we move deeper, we enter a different realm, the heartwood. This is the tree's own history, its bone, its archive. The cells here are no longer living. The water-conducting pipes of the xylem have been decommissioned, but they have not been left empty. The tree, in its infinite wisdom, has filled these cells with a cocktail of chemical compounds, resins, oils, and other extractives. This is where the cedar's famous aroma is born. This is where the tree concentrates its chemical arsenal. The heartwood is saturated with antimicrobial, and insect-repellent substances, it becomes dense, dark, and profoundly resistant to decay. It is no longer part of the tree's active metabolism. It is the structural spine, the pillar that holds the living crown aloft, and a time capsule of the tree's chemical defenses. To stand in the presence of a 1,000-year-old cedar is to stand before a being whose core is composed of this silent, preserved, aromatic wood that was formed centuries before any of us were born, and which will remain long after we are gone. And what of these chemicals? This is where the tree reveals itself not just as an engineer, but as a master chemist. Deep within its cells, it is constantly brewing a sophisticated defense system. The most famous of these compounds, the one that gives cedar its characteristic sharp, clean scent, is a group of molecules called thujones. Thujone is a potent neurotoxin to many insects. To a beetle looking for a meal or a place to lay its eggs, the scent of cedar is not a pleasant perfume, it is a chemical scream of keep out. It is a declaration of inedibility. But the thujones are just one note in a complex chemical chord. The tree also produces a host of other terpenes and phenols. These are aromatic oils that serve multiple purposes. They are antifungal, preventing the growth of molds and fungi that would seek to rot the wood. They are antibacterial, protecting the tree from infection if its bark is wounded. And they deter browsing animals. A deer might nibble on the young shoots of many other trees, but the bitter, pungent taste of cedar is often a powerful deterrent. This chemical factory operates silently, constantly. The leaves, the bark, the wood, every part of the tree is imbued with this protective chemistry. The tree does not need to run or fight. It does not need claws or teeth. It defends itself with a quiet, persistent, and highly effective form of chemical warfare. It has transformed itself into something unpalatable, something indigestible, something that endures simply by being profoundly inhospitable to its enemies. And the beautiful irony is that these same chemicals designed as weapons are what we as humans perceive as a scent of cleanliness, of preservation, of peace. We build closets from its wood precisely because its chemical defenses repel the very creatures that would devour our own fabrics. We have, without perhaps even realizing it, enlisted the ancient defenses of this tree to protect our own vulnerable belongings. Now let's travel down, following the flow of sugars in the phloem, down the massive trunk, past the root flare, and into the dark, secret world of the soil. Here the cedar's story of patience and resilience becomes a story of partnership, for the tree does not live alone. Its roots, extensive as they are only part of the story. They are engaged in one of the most ancient and successful alliances on Earth, a symbiotic relationship with mycorrhizal fungi. Imagine the finest root of the cedar, a delicate, pale thread pushing its way through the soil. Now imagine that thread being met by an even finer network of fungal filaments called hyphae. These fungal threads are so incredibly thin they can penetrate spaces in the soil that the tree's own roots could never reach. They are masters of exploration and absorption. The fungus envelops the tree's root tips, forming a living, interwoven sheath. This is not a parasitic infection. It is a handshake, a contract of mutual benefit. The fungus, which cannot photosynthesize, is hungry for the sugars that the tree produces in such abundance. The cedar, in exchange for this sweet energy, gains a colossal extension of its own root system. The mycorrhizal network acts as a vast, secondary web fanning out into the soil, massively increasing the surface area for water and nutrient absorption. The fungi are particularly adept at unlocking phosphorus and nitrogen, minerals that are often locked up in the soil and unavailable to plants. They are expert miners, breaking down complex organic matter and ferrying the essential nutrients back to the tree. It is a beautiful, silent transaction. The tree provides the fuel, the carbon, and the fungus provides the rare and essential materials from the earth. The cedar's ability to thrive on barren limestone cliffs is not solely its own achievement, it is the achievement of this partnership. The fungus allows it to pull a living from the most meager of circumstances, and this network does more than just transport nutrients. Scientists are now discovering that this wood-wide web can also be a conduit for information. Trees within a forest, linked by this common fungal network, can send chemical signals to one another. A tree under attack by insects might release chemical signals that travel through the fungal network, warning its neighbors to ramp up their own chemical defenses. It is a quiet, subterranean communication system, a community of beings sharing resources and information, all mediated by their fungal partners. The solitary, stoic cedar is in fact deeply connected, a node in a living internet that underlies the entire forest floor. It is a humbling realization that so much of this ancient tree's strength comes from its alliance with another kingdom of life entirely. From this deep, dark world of the roots, let us rise again, up the trunk, and turn our attention to the future. How does a creature that lives for 1,000 years think about time? It does so through its cycles of reproduction, a process as patient and deliberate as every other aspect of its life. The Eastern White Cedar is monoecious, which means that each individual tree produces both male and female cones. They are not showy. There are no fragrant, colorful blossoms to attract pollinators. The cedar entrusts its genetic future to a far more ancient and ubiquitous force, the wind. In the spring, if you look closely at the tips of the tiny branchlets, you can see the cones beginning to form. The male cones are minuscule, little more than tiny, yellowish-brown bumps. They are simple, ephemeral structures designed for a single purpose, to produce pollen. Each pollen grain is a microscopic marvel, a tiny self-contained vessel carrying the male genetic code, equipped with 2 tiny air sacs that act like water wings, giving it buoyancy in the air. The female cones, which appear on different branchlets of the same tree, are also small at first, green and inconspicuous. They are composed of a series of delicate, overlapping scales, each one poised to receive a grain of pollen. And then, on a dry, breezy day, the moment arrives. The male cones open and release their contents in a vast, silent explosion. Clouds of yellow pollen, billions upon billions of grains, are lifted into the air. They are a golden dust, a fine mist, an act of immense faith. The tree casts its future into the wind, hoping that some infinitesimal fraction of this pollen cloud will, by sheer chance, find its way to the receptive scales of a female cone on another tree. It is a game of incredible odds, and it is played on a massive scale. The air becomes thick with this genetic dust, which settles on every surface, a testament to the tree's profligate, hopeful strategy. When a pollen grain lands on a female cone, a slow, wondrous process begins. A pollen tube grows from the grain, tunneling deep into the cone's structure to reach the ovule within. Fertilization occurs, not in a frantic moment, but over a period of weeks. The fertilized ovule begins to develop into a seed, and the small green cone begins to swell and mature, turning from soft green to a leathery brown. All through the summer, the seeds develop, nestled securely between the scales of the cone. Each seed is a tiny package of potential, containing a miniature embryo and a small supply of food to give it a start in life. Attached to each seed is a delicate papery wing. As autumn approaches and the air grows crisp, the cones dry out. The scales, which were once held tightly closed, begin to separate. On another windy day, or perhaps when shaken by a bird or a squirrel, the seeds are released. They do not plummet to the ground. Their tiny wings catch the breeze, and they spin away from the parent tree, spiraling down like miniature helicopters. This is another act of faith, dispersing its children far and wide, hoping that 1 or 2 might land in a place with enough light, enough soil, enough moisture to germinate. Most will not. They will be eaten by birds or mammals, or they will land on solid rock, or in a place too shady to survive. The odds against any single seed becoming a mature tree are astronomical, and so the cedar plays the long game. Every year, for hundreds of years, it produces thousands of seeds. Over the course of its millennial lifespan, it will release millions of them. It is a strategy of immense, patient, unwavering optimism. It is content to know that out of those millions, perhaps a handful will find purchase, will sprout, and will begin their own slow, patient journey toward the sky. And as we consider this grand cycle, let us return once more to the tree itself, to its outermost layer, its interface with the world, the bark. The bark of the Eastern White Cedar is not a smooth, unbroken shield. It is fibrous, reddish-brown, often peeling off in long vertical strips. It feels soft, almost like fabric to the touch, but this is a gentle armor, another marvel of design. The bark is the tree's protection against the daily insults of the world. It is a barrier against insects seeking to bore into the living wood. Its fibrous nature makes it surprisingly resistant to fire. While a hot fire can kill the tree, the bark can often char and insulate the vital living tissues just beneath it, allowing the tree to survive a low-grade ground fire. It is also an insulator, protecting the delicate living cells below from the extremes of summer heat and winter cold. And just beneath this shaggy protective coat lies perhaps the most miraculous layer of all, the cambium. The cambium is a layer of cells only a few molecules thick, yet it is the engine of the tree's growth. It is a zone of perpetually dividing cells, a sheath of pure potential that encases the entire trunk and all its branches. Every year the cambium divides. The cells it produces on the inside become new xylem, new water pipes. This is what we see as an annual growth ring. The cells it produces on the outside become new phloem, new food conduits. The cambium is where the tree's history is written. In a good year, with plenty of rain and sun, the cambium produces a wide ring of new xylem. In a year of drought or hardship, the ring is narrow. By looking at the rings of a cedar, one can read the story of the seasons, the droughts, the fires, the prosperous years, stretching back centuries. The cambium is the tree's memory, its scribe, its engine of expansion. It is the reason the tree grows ever wider, ever stronger, year after patient year. It is the living embodiment of the tree's slow, steady, and persistent accumulation of time. Finally, let us travel to the very edge of the tree, to its interface with the sky, to the leaves. The leaves of the cedar are not broad and flat, like an oak or a maple. They are tiny, scale-like structures, pressed flat against the branchlets, forming elegant, lace-like sprays. This design is a masterclass in adaptation, particularly for an evergreen that must endure harsh, drying winter winds. The small surface area of these scales minimizes water loss, allowing the tree to conserve its precious moisture through the long, frozen months. And it is here, in these humble, flattened green scales, that the most fundamental miracle of all occurs: photosynthesis. Inside each tiny scale are millions of chloroplasts, microscopic green engines powered by the sun. Here the tree performs a kind of quiet, daily alchemy that is the foundation of nearly all life on Earth. It draws water up from the roots, a silent river through the xylem. It breathes in carbon dioxide from the air through tiny pores called stomata, and using the energy of sunlight, captured by the green pigment chlorophyll, it breaks apart the water and carbon dioxide molecules and reassembles them into a new substance, sugar, glucose. This is the tree's food, the fuel that powers every single process we have discussed: the growth of the cambium, the production of defensive chemicals, the feeding of its fungal partners, the creation of seeds. The byproduct of this elegant reaction is oxygen. The very air we breathe is a gift from this quiet, constant process. As we rest, as we sleep, the cedars of the world are awake. They are silently inhaling what we exhale, and exhaling what we must inhale to live. They are turning sunlight into substance, weaving the fabric of their own bodies from light and air. It is a process of such profound importance and such quiet grace that it is easy to overlook. But it is happening now, in every leaf of every cedar. The patient machine is at work, converting the energy of a star 93 million miles away into the patient, enduring life of the tree. From the slow fire of its metabolism to the fortress of its cellular walls, from its silent internal rivers to its chemical arsenal, from its underground alliances to its faith in the wind, every aspect of the Eastern White Cedar is a lesson in patience, in resilience, in a life tuned to the slow, deep rhythms of the earth. It is a machine, yes, but a machine built of living cells, a machine that collaborates with fungi and communicates with its kin, a machine that breathes and grows and remembers. It is a testament to the idea that strength does not always lie in speed or aggression, but in the quiet, unwavering power of endurance. As you continue to drift deeper into rest, let this intricate, silent world of the cedar be your landscape, a world of patient machinery, humming with a life that measures its success not in days or years, but in centuries. Chapter 3. The Cedar's Commonwealth. Architect of a forest ecosystem. This quiet, unwavering power of endurance, however, does not end at the bark. It is not a secret kept within the rings of its heartwood or the microscopic channels of its xylem. Instead, it radiates outward, a silent and profound influence that shapes the very world around it. The cedar is not merely an inhabitant of the forest. In so many ways, it is the forest's quiet architect, its patient governor, the founder of a commonwealth of interconnected lives. Its existence is a gravitational force pulling countless other beings into its orbit, offering them terms for their own survival, written in the language of shadow, shelter, and sustenance. To understand this tree is to understand that it is not a singular entity, but the heart of a sprawling, intricate kingdom. Let's begin with the most immediate and tangible gift the cedar offers, the gift of shelter. As we step from an open, sunlit meadow or a sparse, deciduous wood into a grove of Eastern White Cedar, the change is instantaneous and absolute. The quality of the light shifts from a bright, direct glare to a soft, diffused green-gold twilight. The air itself feels different, cooler in the summer, calmer, and strangely insulated in the winter. The sound of the world is muffled, as if the dense, overlapping fans of foliage are a form of natural acoustic tiling, absorbing the sharp edges of every noise. The wind, which might be rushing and tearing through the crowns of the maples and oaks, is tamed here. It becomes a gentle, sighing whisper that moves through the boughs without malice. This is more than just shade, it is the creation of a microclimate, a pocket of stability in a world of constant flux. Imagine a winter day. Snow is falling, not in gentle flakes but in a driving horizontal blizzard. Out in the open, the world is a fury of white. The ground is buried deep, every landmark erased. But here, beneath the cedars, a profound peace reigns. The tree's structure, with its dense, gale-like leaves arranged in flattened sprays, is a masterpiece of interception. Each frond catches and holds the snow, and then passes the load to the one beneath it, and so on, until the entire canopy becomes a thick, heavy blanket, a shield against the storm. Walking beneath them, you would find the ground nearly bare, dusted with only the finest powder that filtered through the gaps. The air is still. The temperature is noticeably warmer, sometimes by several critical degrees, than the surrounding landscape. For a creature caught in the teeth of the gale, this is not a trivial comfort. It is the difference between life and death. This is the sanctuary sought by the white-tailed deer. In the harshest months of the year, when the energy cost of simply staying warm can be lethal, these groves become what are known as deer yards. They are cities of refuge. The deer move in, their hooves making soft scuffing sounds on the dry, fragrant carpet of fallen cedar litter. Here the snow is not deep enough to hinder their movement, allowing them to conserve precious calories. They can move freely, browse, and rest without plunging through chest-deep drifts. The dense canopy not only blocks the snow but also reduces the loss of radiant heat from their bodies into the cold night sky. It is, for all intents and purposes, a living roof. If you were to sit quietly in such a place, you might hear the soft snap of a twig under a hoof, or the rhythmic grinding sound of a deer stripping a small branch of its foliage. In the deep quiet of a winter wood, it is the sound of survival, made possible by the cedar's tireless, passive engineering. They huddle together, their warm breath misting in the frigid air, secure in the knowledge that the cedar stands guard against the worst the winter can throw at them. But the deer are not the only residents. This architectural marvel serves a population that extends from the forest floor to the highest, most delicate spire of the tree. Let us look closer into the very heart of that dense foliage. For a small bird, the world is a place of constant peril. The sky is patrolled by hawks, the ground by foxes and weasels. The wind and rain can chill and destroy a fragile nest in moments. Finding a safe place to raise a family is perhaps the single most important task of its life, and for many, the cedar is the answer. Consider the pine siskin, a small, streaky finch with flashes of bright yellow on its wings. It is a restless, energetic bird, often seen in chattering flocks. But when it comes time to nest, it seeks the seclusion and security that only a dense conifer can provide. The female, the primary builder, will search for a suitable branch, often far from the trunk, but shielded from above and below by layers of green sprays. She begins to weave her nest, a small compact cup, from an assortment of fine twigs, grasses and rootlets. She lines it with the softest materials she can find: thistledown, plant fibers, animal fur, and feathers. The cedar itself contributes, its shaggy reddish-brown bark providing long, soft strips that are woven into the structure, binding it together. The nest is a miniature work of art, a perfect cradle, but its genius lies in its placement. It is tucked so deep within the foliage that it is nearly invisible. A predator looking up from below would see only a chaotic mesh of green. A hawk soaring above would see only the solid, uninterrupted canopy. The dense leaves buffer the nest from the wind and conceal it from the rain. Here, in this hidden nursery, she will lay her pale bluish-green eggs, speckled with brown, and incubate them in a world of quiet, green-filtered light. The cedar becomes more than a home. It becomes a co-conspirator in the act of creation. And the siskins are just one of many. The black-throated green warbler, a tiny jewel of a bird with a vibrant yellow face and a buzzy insect-like song, frequently chooses the cedar for its nesting site. So too do chipping sparrows and mourning doves. For birds that roost rather than nest, like owls and grouse, the cedar offers a different kind of security. A ruffed grouse, in winter, might plunge into a soft snowdrift to stay warm overnight. But on milder nights, it will fly up into the thick branches of a cedar, perching close to the trunk, completely hidden from the view of a hunting great horned owl. The owl, in turn, might use the very same grove as its daytime roost, its mottled feathers blending perfectly with the dark bark and deep shadows, allowing it to rest undisturbed until dusk. The tree is a hotel with a diverse clientele, each seeking something slightly different: concealment, structural support, a buffer from the elements, and the cedar provides it all without prejudice or favor. It is a silent, accommodating host to an entire aviary. While shelter is a passive gift, the cedar also offers itself, quite literally, as sustenance. It is a larder, though a modest one. Its foliage is not rich in the way a maple leaf or a berry might be. It is high in aromatic oils and compounds that can make it difficult to digest. Yet, in the stark arithmetic of winter, it is a vital resource. For the same white-tailed deer that shelter in its groves, the cedar is a critical source of winter browse. When acorns are buried under feet of snow and the buds of deciduous trees are sparse, the evergreen foliage of the cedar is always available. A deer will stand on its hind legs, stretching its long neck to reach the tender new growth. You can often see the evidence of this browsing in a cedar swamp, a distinct line, the browse line, about 5 or 6 feet from the ground. Everything below this line is stripped bare, while everything above it is lush and green. It is a visible record of hunger, a tide mark of desperation left by the winter herd. The snowshoe hare, with its oversized furry feet that act like natural snowshoes, is another key browser. It relies on the cedar for both food and cover. During the day, it will remain perfectly still in a form, a shallow depression in the snow, often at the base of a cedar whose low-hanging branches provide a roof. Its white winter coat makes it nearly invisible against the snow, but as twilight descends, it will emerge to feed. It nips off the ends of the lowest branches, those below the deer's reach, its sharp incisors making a quiet clipping sound in the frozen air. The relationship is so tight that the populations of hare and their primary predator, the lynx, can rise and fall in cycles that are indirectly tied to the availability of habitat, like these cedar swamps. The tree is not just a backdrop for this drama of predator and prey, it is a foundational element of the stage itself. Even the tree's cones, though small and seemingly insignificant, are a source of food. Each cone is a delicate, leathery structure, holding tiny winged seeds. For the pine siskin and other finches like the common redpoll, these seeds are a high-energy food source. They will cling to the branches, often upside down, meticulously prying open the scales of the cones to extract the seeds with their delicate beaks. A flock of siskins descending on a cedar grove can be a lively, noisy affair, a sudden burst of activity in the otherwise solemn quiet. It is another transaction in the cedar's great economy. The tree offers its future, its seeds, in exchange for the service of dispersal, as some seeds will inevitably be dropped and scattered to new ground. Now, let us shrink our perspective. Let's move past the large mammals and the birds and zoom in, closer and closer, until a single frond of cedar foliage fills our entire view. To us, it is a single green textured thing, but to a vast world of smaller creatures, this is an entire landscape. This is a world of towering green canyons, waxy surfaces, and hidden valleys. And this world, too, has its inhabitants. Meet the Arborvitae leaf miner, Arborvitae Thuja. This is a tiny moth, so small you would likely never notice it. Its adult life is fleeting, a brief dance of mating and egg-laying. The female moth seeks out the newest, most tender growth on the cedar and deposits her eggs, each one a microscopic promise of life. When the larva hatches, it does not feed on the outside of the leaf. Instead, it burrows directly into the tissue of the cedar's scale-like leaves. It becomes a miner, tunneling through the living green world. From the outside, the only sign of its presence is a small brownish or yellowish patch on the frond, the part of the leaf that has been hollowed out. The larva lives its entire developmental life inside the tree, protected from the elements and most predators, consuming the tree from within. It is an act of intimate consumption, a life lived between the upper and lower surfaces of a single tiny leaf. The cedar, for this creature, is not just a home or a source of food, it is the entire universe. But no resource goes unchallenged. Where there are herbivores, there are predators. Tiny spiders, masters of camouflage, spin intricate webs between the cedar sprays, hoping to catch the adult leaf miner moths as they emerge. Lacewing larvae, voracious predators that look like tiny crawling alligators, patrol the surfaces of the fronds, searching for the eggs of the leaf miners or other small insects. Ladybugs, both in their larval and adult stages, hunt for aphids that might be trying to suck the sap from the cedar's tender stems. The cedar branch is a multi-story city, with its grazers, its hunters, and its hidden residents, all living out their complex lives in a space no bigger than your hand. The tree is a stage for a drama that is just as intense and vital as that of the deer and the owl, only played out on a scale of millimeters. It is a testament to the fact that every niche, no matter how small, will eventually be filled by life. The cedar's influence, however, extends beneath the ground, into a realm we rarely see or consider. The tree is a chemist, a geographer, and a soil scientist, patiently altering its own environment to better suit its needs. This process begins with the constant, gentle rain of its shed foliage. Unlike the broad leaves of a maple or an oak, which fall in a great rush each autumn, the cedar sheds its older, inner foliage slowly and continuously. This creates a deep, springy, and wonderfully fragrant carpet on the forest floor beneath it. If you have ever walked through a cedar grove, you know this feeling. It is like walking on a dense, natural cushion. But this litter is very different from the leaves of its deciduous neighbors. It is rich in acidic compounds and resins, the same ones that give the tree its characteristic scent and make it resistant to decay. When this litter falls, it begins to decompose, but it does so very, very slowly. A maple leaf might be broken down by earthworms and bacteria and incorporated back into the soil in a single season. A cedar frond might persist for years. As this slow decomposition proceeds, it leaches these acidic compounds into the soil. Over decades, and then centuries, a grove of cedars will profoundly change the soil chemistry beneath it. It lowers the soil's pH, making it more acidic. This is not a random act. It is a form of ecological engineering. The cedar is creating conditions that it thrives in, but that many of its competitors do not. Many other plants, including aggressive, fast-growing species that might otherwise crowd out young cedar seedlings, cannot tolerate this acidic soil. They are, in effect, being gently but firmly pushed out. The cedar is claiming the ground, not through rapid growth or aggression, but through a slow, persistent alteration of the very foundation of the forest. In the place of these competitors, a unique community of acid-loving plants begins to flourish. You will see carpets of vibrant green mosses like sphagnum or haircap moss that thrive in the cool, moist, acidic conditions. You might find delicate shade-tolerant ferns such as the wood ferns or the evergreen marginal shield fern uncurling their fronds in the dappled light. You might see the ghostly white stems of Indian pipe, a fascinating plant that lacks chlorophyll and lives as a parasite on the fungal networks in the soil. Or you may find the brilliant red berries of bunchberry, or the delicate bell-like flowers of twinflower trailing across the mossy floor. This understory community is not there by accident. It is the direct result of the cedar's long-term influence. The tree has cultivated its own garden, favoring a specific suite of quiet, slow-growing companions that can live within the world it has created. It has curated its own neighborhood. This profound influence extends to the very shape of the land itself. The Eastern White Cedar often grows in wet places, along the banks of rivers, on the shores of lakes, and in the low-lying areas that we call cedar swamps. In these locations it plays another critical role, that of a guardian. Its root system is not a single deep taproot like that of an oak. Instead, it is a shallow, fibrous, and widely spreading network. These roots, dense and interlocking, permeate the top layers of the soil, binding the particles of sand, silt, and clay together into a cohesive, stable mass. Picture a river in spring flood. The water is high, brown, and powerful, tearing at the banks, undercutting the soil, and carrying it away downstream. This is the force of erosion, a constant sculpting of the landscape. But where a line of cedars grows along the bank, the story is different. The water rushes against the shore, but it meets this dense, living net of roots. The energy of the current is dissipated, slowed, and absorbed. The soil, held firmly in the grip of the root mass, refuses to yield. The cedar bank holds fast while the unprotected bank across the river collapses and retreats. The tree is a living retaining wall, a breakwater, a tireless defender of the shoreline. It performs a service of geological significance, stabilizing the land, preventing the loss of precious topsoil, and maintaining the clarity and health of the water by preventing excessive sediment from washing into the stream. It does this work silently, year after year, century after century, its roots holding the world together. Even in death, the cedar continues to serve its Commonwealth. An old cedar, perhaps after 3 or 4 centuries of life, may finally succumb to a great windstorm or the slow work of heart-rot fungi. It falls with a great muffled crash, coming to rest on the forest floor it helped create. But its story is far from over. Its wood is famously resistant to decay, filled with those same preservative oils that make it so aromatic. A fallen oak might rot away to dust in a few decades, but a cedar log can persist for a century or more. In its slow, patient decay, it becomes a new kind of habitat, a new center of life. Its surface becomes a perfect seedbed for mosses and lichens, which create a soft green water-retentive blanket over the wood. The space beneath the log is a dark, moist and stable refuge. A red-backed salamander might spend its entire life there hunting for mites and insects in the cool, damp earth. A garter snake might use it as a place to hibernate through the winter, safe from the frost. Insects, like carpenter ants, will eventually begin to tunnel into the softening wood, creating galleries that will in turn be used by other creatures. A winter wren, a tiny brown bird with a remarkably loud song, might build its nest in a hollowed-out cavity in the decaying log. As the wood slowly, ever so slowly, breaks down, it becomes what ecologists call a nurse log. The decaying wood is a storehouse of moisture and nutrients. In the competitive world of the forest floor, a tiny seed that happens to land on this log has a distinct advantage. Its roots can penetrate the soft, damp wood, finding a steady supply of water and a slow release of nutrients that the fungi and bacteria are liberating from the tough cellulose. You can often see this in an old forest, a perfectly straight line of young trees or hemlocks, their roots straddling the ghost of a long-vanished log that gave them their start in life. The fallen cedar becomes a cradle for the next generation. It gives back everything it took from the soil, but it does so slowly, carefully, and in a way that nurtures the future of the very forest it once dominated. From providing a roof against the winter storm, to cultivating the chemistry of the soil, from hiding the nest of a warbler to feeding a snowshoe hare, from hosting a microscopic world within its leaves to holding a riverbank against the flood, the Eastern White Cedar is so much more than a tree. It is a presence. It is an architect, an engineer, a provider, a chemist and a guardian. It is the quiet, unassuming center of a vast and complicated network of lives, each one dependent on the others, and all of them, in some fundamental way, dependent on the patient, enduring generosity of the tree. The Commonwealth it governs is not one of rules and commands, but of opportunities and conditions. It does not demand fealty, it simply exists, and in its existence, it creates a world. It offers shade, and the shade dwellers come. It offers acidic soil, and the acid lovers arrive. It offers dense cover, and the vulnerable take refuge. It is a profound lesson in the nature of power, which in the forest is not about dominance, but about influence. It is about creating a system so stable, so beneficial, that life flows toward it, naturally and inexorably. As we let our minds drift, picture this interconnected world. Feel the cool, still air of the cedar grove. Smell the sharp, clean fragrance of its foliage and the rich, damp scent of the duff layer underfoot. Hear the quiet clip of a hare browsing, the distant chatter of a siskin, the gentle sigh of wind that barely stirs the deepest boughs. This is not just a collection of individual organisms, it is a single breathing entity. It is a system, a community, a commonwealth, with the cedar as its green and living heart, and it all functions in a deep and abiding quiet, a testament to the intricate silent machinery of life, humming along patiently through the seasons and the centuries. Chapter 4. Arborvitae, a history of human interdependence, a testament to the intricate, silent machinery of life, humming along patiently through the seasons and the centuries. And for much of that time, for millennia, another intelligence has been listening to that hum. Another life form, walking on two legs, has learned to read the seasons in the cedar's boughs, and has found in its quiet presence not just a shelter, but a partner. For the story of Thuja Occidentalis is not just one of ecology, of soil and water and sunlight. It is also a profoundly human story. It's a story of interdependence, of how our own species learned to live with this tree, to see it not merely as wood, but as a living relative, a provider, and in the most literal sense, a source of life itself. So let's stay here, in the quiet of this grove, and allow the human story to gently unfold. Before the arrival of ships from across the ocean, before the drawing of maps and borders, the people who have lived in this part of the world for time immemorial, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and many others, had a name for this tree. In the Anishinaabe language, it is called gizik, and it was not simply a plant. It was, and is, regarded as one of the 4 sacred medicines, a gift from the Creator to help the people. It is a being with a spirit, a teacher of generosity and resilience. This is a way of seeing the world that is profoundly different from a purely scientific classification. It is a relationship built not on analysis, but on reciprocity. You do not just take from Gizikik, you offer tobacco, you offer thanks, you listen to what the tree has to teach. Imagine living in a world where your shelter, your transport, your medicine, and your spiritual well-being are all intertwined with a single living being that grows just outside your door. This was the reality. The wood of the white cedar is a marvel of natural engineering. It is astonishingly lightweight, yet remarkably resistant to rot. Hold a piece of it in your hand, and you can feel this paradox. It's buoyant, almost insubstantial, yet the tight grain speaks of a quiet strength. Now imagine you need to build a canoe. You need a vessel that is light enough for a single person to carry over a portage, from one lake to the next, yet strong enough to carry a family and all their goods through choppy water. You need something that can be repaired with materials found in the forest. You need a design perfected over thousands of years of trial and error. The ribs of that canoe, the curved skeleton that gives the vessel its shape and integrity, were often crafted from white cedar. The craftsman would search for a tree with the perfect grain, one that would bend without breaking. They would split the wood, steam it over a fire to make it pliable, and then patiently, skillfully, bend it into the precise curves needed. Each rib was a testament to an intimate knowledge of the wood, an understanding that came not from a textbook but from a lifetime of observation. The planks, the thin sheathing that formed the canoe's skin beneath the birch bark, were also cedar. Sliced into thin, flexible boards, they created a smooth, resilient hull. When you see a birch bark canoe, you are seeing in essence a collaboration between the birch tree, which provides the waterproof skin, and the cedar tree, which provides the strong, lightweight sole. It is a vessel born of the forest, a perfect expression of its place. And when it glides across the water, it is almost silent, a whisper of wood and bark moving through the world. This same wood, this same rot-resistant, lightweight material, was also the foundation of the home. The great longhouses of the Haudenosaunee, sprawling structures that housed entire extended families, were often framed and sheathed with cedar. The bark, peeled from the trees in long, pliable sheets, could be used for roofing and siding. The wood itself, split into planks, formed the walls and platforms within. Think of that for a moment. An entire village, its homes and its transportation, built from the gifts of the surrounding forest, with the cedar as a cornerstone. You would live your life surrounded by the scent of it. The gentle, clean, aromatic fragrance would be the smell of home, of safety, of community. It would be the scent of the cradle you were rocked in as a baby, and the scent of the walls that sheltered you as an elder. The tree wasn't just a resource, it was the very fabric of your world, and its gifts were not limited to grand structures. The fibers of its inner bark could be separated, pounded, and twisted into strong, supple cordage. This rope was essential. It could be used for lashing together building frames, for weaving bags and mats, for creating fishing lines and nets. It was nature's twine, endlessly useful, always available. The wood was soft enough to be carved with simple tools, yet held its shape beautifully. It was used to make bowls, paddles, and ceremonial objects, each item carrying the spirit of the tree from which it came. This was a world of deep material intelligence, where every part of the cedar had a purpose, a role to play in the intricate dance of human survival and culture. Nothing was wasted. Every shaving, every strip of bark, every root had a potential use, a piece of knowledge passed down from grandparent to grandchild. But perhaps the cedar's most profound gift, the one that would echo through history and give the tree its European name, was the medicine held within its leaves. The flat, scale-like sprays are rich in oils and compounds, but most importantly, they are a potent source of vitamin C. For people living a traditional lifestyle, eating a varied diet of fish, game, and wild plants, this was simply part of the balanced whole. But for those who were not from this land, who did not know its secrets, the lack of this one essential molecule could be a death sentence. And so our story shifts. We travel forward in time to the brutal winter of 1535. A French explorer named Jacques Cartier and his crew are trapped by ice in the St. Lawrence River near the Iroquoian village of Stadacona. They are far from home, unprepared for the severity of a North American winter, and they are dying. A strange and horrifying illness is ravaging them. Their gums swell and bleed, their teeth fall out, old wounds reopen, their joints ache with an unbearable pain, and a profound lethargy settles over them. They are suffering from scurvy. Today, we understand scurvy on a biochemical level. We know it's caused by a deficiency of ascorbic acid, or vitamin C. Our bodies, unlike those of many other animals, cannot synthesize this molecule. We must get it from our diet. Vitamin C is crucial for the production of collagen, the protein that is essentially the glue holding our bodies together. It's the primary component of our skin, our blood vessels, our bones, our cartilage. Without it, the body literally begins to fall apart. The intricate machinery of life begins to break down. To Cartier and his men, it must have seemed like a curse, a malevolent force of this new harsh land. By their own accounts, of the 110 men in his party, 25 had already died, and the rest were so sick they had lost all hope. The local Iroquoians, of course, were not suffering from this disease. They understood the forest. They knew which plants to eat during the long, lean winter months to stay healthy. Seeing the desperate state of the French, they showed them the cure. They taught Cartier's men how to gather the needles and bark of a particular tree, the one they called aneda. They showed them how to boil these into a tea, a rich aromatic decoction, and to drink it every day. The tree, of course, was our Eastern White Cedar. Imagine the scene. The desperate, dying sailors, huddled in their frozen ships, being given this strange, fragrant tea by the people of the land. They were suspicious at first, but with no other options they drank it, and the effect was nothing short of miraculous. Within days, the bleeding stopped, the pain began to recede, strength returned to their limbs. For men who were on the verge of death, it was a resurrection. Their bodies, starved of that one essential molecule, were finally given the key to repair themselves. The collagen synthesis could restart. The microscopic machinery could begin to hum again. Cartier was so profoundly struck by this recovery, by this tree that had literally pulled his crew back from the grave, that he gave it a name that has stuck ever since. He called it Arborvitae. In Latin, this means tree of life. It is a name born of desperation and deliverance, a testament to the life-saving power hidden within the green scales of a common evergreen. When his expedition finally returned to France, he brought news of this remarkable tree, and its name, Arborvitae, entered the horticultural language of Europe. And here we find a quiet but profound divergence in worldviews. For the indigenous peoples, the cedar was a sacred gift, a relative, a partner in life known for millennia. Its healing power was just one aspect of its generous spirit, understood through a deep, holistic relationship. For the Europeans, it was a discovery, a resource, a chemical solution to a physical problem. Cartier named it the Tree of Life because it saved his life and the lives of his men. The Iroquoians already knew it was a tree of life because it was woven into every aspect of their lives, their homes, their travel, their ceremonies, their health. The difference is subtle, but vast. One is a name born of an intimate, lifelong relationship. The other is a name born of a single, desperate encounter. As the centuries passed and colonization spread, the European view began to dominate. The great cedar forests were no longer seen primarily as a living pharmacy or the architecture of a canoe. They became a commodity. They became timber. The wood's legendary resistance to rot made it incredibly valuable for anything that had to endure the elements. It was logged for fence posts, for shingles, for siding, for boat building, for telephone poles. The straight, tall trees that had been revered were now measured in board feet. The silent, patient work of the forest, growing over hundreds of years, could be undone by the saw in a matter of minutes. The scale of this industry was immense. Vast swaths of old-growth cedar forest, ecosystems that had taken centuries to develop, were cleared. The logic of the market replaced the logic of reciprocity. The tree was no longer a relative to be thanked, but a resource to be extracted, and yet the tree endured. Because of its ability to grow in damp, swampy areas that were less desirable for farming, and its incredible resilience, the white cedar held on. It persists in our landscapes, often in places others trees cannot. You see it lining farm fields as wind breaks, a living fence that echoes its past use. You see it in old cemeteries, its evergreen boughs a symbol of eternal life, a quiet nod to its Latin name. You see it sold in nurseries as a common hedging plant, its ability to form a dense screen of green put to suburban use. It is still here, the same tree that provided the ribs for canoes that slip silently through pristine waters now forms the clipped hedges of our backyards. The same tree whose boughs saved a crew of dying sailors now offers its fragrant shelter to nesting robins. It has witnessed a profound transformation on this continent. It has felt the gentle touch of the carver and the harsh bite of the steel saw. It has been known as Giesecke and as Arborvitae. It has been seen as a sacred teacher and as a standing reserve of valuable lumber. And perhaps, as we sit here in the quiet of this grove, we can feel the weight of that history. We can feel the presence of these two different ways of knowing a living thing. One that sees a complex web of relationships, and one that sees a collection of useful properties. But the tree itself simply is. It stands, patient and green, its roots deep in the soil of this continent, its flat leaves turning towards the sun. It continues its slow, silent work of turning light into life. It holds the memory of the longhouse and the canoe in its very DNA. It holds the biochemical secret that conquered scurvy in its leaves. It holds the quiet resilience that has allowed it to survive the great changes brought by human hands. It is a living chronicle, a silent witness to our own story. And by learning its story, we learn something deeper about ourselves. We learn about our capacity for brilliant adaptation and our capacity for short-sighted destruction. We learn about our need for connection, for community, for a relationship with the living world that is based on more than just what we can take. The tree of life has much to teach us, still, if we are willing to be quiet and to listen. Chapter 5: Echoes of Eywa. From ancient forest to Pandora's moon, and to listen. It is a uniquely human thing, this desire to listen to the world and to translate its silent language into stories. For as long as we have gathered around fires, for as long as we have looked up at the stars, we have felt a deep, persistent need to find a center to our world, a focal point, an anchor that connects the heavens above, the earth we walk upon, and the hidden worlds that lie beneath. And more often than not, across cultures and continents, across millennia, that anchor has taken the form of a tree. Think of it. It's an image that resonates deep within our collective memory. The Norse spoke of Yggdrasil, the immense ash tree whose roots drank from the wells of fate and whose branches held up the 9 realms. In Hindu cosmology, there is the Ashvata, the sacred fig, an inverted tree with its roots in the heavens and its branches growing downward to shade the earth, a perfect metaphor for divine energy flowing into the material world. For the Buddha, enlightenment was found not in a temple, but in the quiet shade of the Bodhi tree. These are not just stories, they are expressions of a fundamental human intuition, a recognition that life is connected, that there are threads running between all things, and that a tree with its roots in the dark soil and its leaves in the sunlit air is the most perfect physical embodiment of that connection. This ancient, universal human longing for a world tree found its most recent, and perhaps its most spectacular, expression not in a sacred text but on a cinema screen. In the world of Pandora, a distant moon teeming with impossible life, we were introduced to 2 trees that captured the global imagination: the colossal home tree of the Occidentalis clan, and the luminous sacred tree of souls. These were not just pieces of alien flora, they were the heart of a culture, the center of a world, and a living, breathing representation of a planetary consciousness called Eywa. Home Tree was a vertical city, a spiraling sanctuary that housed an entire civilization within its living architecture. The Tree of Souls was a place of communion, a biological archive where the memories of generations were stored, accessible through a direct physical neural link. It was a breathtaking vision, a piece of science fiction so vivid, so deeply resonant, that it felt like a memory of a world we once knew, or perhaps a world we long to know again. But where does such an incredible vision come from? An artist's imagination is a powerful thing, but it rarely works in a vacuum. It gathers seeds from the real world, and if you look for the seeds of home tree, if you search for the real-world model for a sacred tree that serves as a cradle of life, a giver of medicine, and a symbol of ancient endurance, you find them not in space, but clinging to the limestone cliffs of North America. You find them in the quiet, humble, and profoundly powerful form of the Eastern White Cedar, Thuja Occidentalis, the tree of life. Let's begin with the most striking parallel, the sheer physical presence. Home tree on Pandora is depicted as an ancient, gnarled, impossibly large being. Its structure is not one of smooth, uniform growth, but of immense, twisting columns and interwoven roots that seem to defy gravity. It speaks of immense age, of millennia spent enduring the elements. Now picture in your mind one of the ancient cedars of the Niagara Escarpment. These are not the tall, straight cedars of a managed forest. These are the cliff dwellers. For over 1,000 years, some of these trees have been growing, not upwards but outwards from the sheer rock face. Their roots, patient and persistent, have probed into the tiniest fissures in the limestone, expanding with microscopic force, gripping the rock with a tenacity that is difficult to comprehend. The wind and ice of 1,000 winters have sculpted them. Their trunks are not straight, they are twisted into spirals, their wood dense and contorted by the constant stress of their precarious existence. Their bark is scarred and furrowed, a living map of their long history. Some branches reach out into the void, while others curl back to brace themselves against the stone. To look at one is to see a living sculpture of resilience. Now scale that image up. Imagine that gnarled 1,000-year-old form, that testament to survival, magnified to the size of a skyscraper. The visual language is identical. The art of Pandora did not invent this form. It simply paid homage to the real-life architecture of an ancient cedar clinging to a cliff. It took this quiet, terrestrial masterpiece of survival and gave it a home among the floating mountains of a distant moon. But its form is only the beginning of the story. A tree is more than its shape, just as a house is more than its walls. It is a place. It is a promise of safety. Just as Home Tree was a vertical city for the Na'vi, the Eastern White Cedar is a sanctuary, a multi-story metropolis for the creatures of the northern forest. Its biology makes it one of nature's most brilliant architects of shelter. The cedar's foliage is not made of broad leaves that fall in winter, but of dense, overlapping, scale-like leaves arranged in flattened sprays. These sprays create an incredibly thick canopy, a thatched roof that is nearly impervious to snow and rain. In the depths of winter, when the rest of the forest is buried under a deep blanket of white, the world beneath a stand of cedars is a different place entirely. The snow cover is thin, or even non-existent. The biting wind is calmed to a mere whisper. The temperature can be several degrees warmer than the surrounding woods. For the white-tailed deer, these cedar stands are not just a convenience, they are a matter of life and death. They are known as deer yards, critical wintering areas where herds gather to escape the worst of the cold, conserving precious energy and finding it easier to move about and browse for food. We can see, in this humble gathering of real-world animals, the echo of the Na'vi finding refuge within the protective embrace of their home tree. The cedar is their home. It is their promise of surviving until the spring. And the guest list is long. The dense foliage provides perfect nesting sites for countless bird species, from warblers to finches, hidden from the prying eyes of hawks and owls. In the summer, its branches are alive with their songs. The red squirrel will build its messy dray of twigs and leaves in a cedar's fork, and the snowshoe hare, its coat turned winter white, will find both food and camouflage at its base. The bark, with its countless nooks and crannies, is an entire ecosystem unto itself, home to a universe of insects, spiders, mosses, and lichens. Each cedar is not a single organism living in the forest, it is a forest in miniature. It is a living apartment building, a cradle of biodiversity, fulfilling the exact same ecological role for its inhabitants that Home Tree did for its own. The principle is the same, whether on a limestone cliff in Ontario or a floating mountain on Pandora. Life gathers around a source of stability and shelter. This idea of the tree as a giver of life moves from the metaphorical to the profoundly literal when we consider the tree's medicinal history. This is perhaps the most direct and powerful link between our real-world cedar and its cinematic counterpart. In the film, the Tree of Souls is a place of healing and connection, a biological marvel that can transfer consciousness and preserve the spirits of the dead. It is in essence the ultimate source of life and spiritual well-being. This might sound like pure fantasy, but the name given to the Eastern White Cedar by European botanists is Arborvitae. It is Latin, and it translates quite literally to Tree of Life. This name was not given for poetic reasons. It was earned. In the winter of 1535, the French explorer Jacques Cartier and his crew were trapped by ice in the St. Lawrence River, near what is now Quebec. They were starving, and worse, they were dying from scurvy, a horrific disease caused by a lack of vitamin C. Their gums were rotting, their teeth were falling out, and their bodies were racked with pain. They were dying a slow, agonizing death. Thousands of miles from home, the local Iroquois people, seeing their plight, showed them a cure. They taught the French to harvest the needles and bark of a certain tree, to boil them into a tea, and to drink the resulting brew. That tree was the Eastern White Cedar. Its foliage is incredibly rich in vitamin C. The crew drank the tea, and within days they began to recover. It was, to them, a miracle. They had been saved from certain death by the grace and knowledge of the indigenous people, and by the life-giving chemistry of this humble evergreen. When Cartier returned to France, he brought tales of this wondrous tree, the Arborvitae, the Tree of Life. This story is a powerful reminder that for millennia before the arrival of Europeans, the cedar was a sacred and essential part of the pharmacy of the first peoples, from the Anishinaabe to the Haudenosaunee. It was used to treat everything from fevers and coughs to headaches and rheumatism. It was a cornerstone of their health, a living medicine cabinet. The sacred healing power of the Tree of Souls on Pandora is not a fantasy. It is a direct reflection of a real documented biological truth. Our Tree of Life has been healing people for centuries. We just needed to be quiet and to listen to those who knew its secrets. And finally, we arrive at the deepest and most subtle connection of all, the very concept of Eywa, the planetary consciousness of Pandora that connects all living things through a vast biological neural network. This is the heart of the film's message, that life is not a collection of separate individuals, but a single interwoven system. On Pandora, this network is made visible. We see the glowing tendrils of the trees and plants, the neural cues of the animals, all plugging into one immense sentient web. It's a beautiful, powerful metaphor, and astonishingly, it is a metaphor for something that is very, very real. Right now, beneath our feet, under the soil of nearly every forest on Earth, there exists a network of almost unimaginable complexity. It is sometimes called the Wood Wide Web. It is the vast, sprawling, interconnected system of mycorrhizal fungi. These are not the mushrooms we see on the surface. Those are just the fleeting, fruiting bodies. The main organism is a network of impossibly fine threads called mycelium that permeates the soil and fuses with the roots of trees. It is not a parasitic relationship. It is one of the most successful and ancient symbiotic partnerships on the planet. The fungus is a master miner, brilliant at extracting water and crucial nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen from the soil, which it passes on to the tree. In exchange, the tree, through photosynthesis, creates sugars, liquid sunshine, a source of energy, and feeds it back to the fungus. It is a fair trade, but it is so much more than that. This mycelial network doesn't just connect one fungus to one tree. It connects tree to tree, to tree, to tree. It is a shared subterranean infrastructure. Through this network, trees can communicate. They can pass resources back and forth. A large, healthy mother tree, a monarch of the forest, can send excess sugars through the network to smaller, shaded saplings that are struggling to get enough sunlight. It is, for all intents and purposes, nursing its young. They can also send warning signals. If one tree is attacked by a plague of insects, it can release chemical signals into the fungal network, alerting its neighbors. The other trees, receiving this message, can then begin to ramp up their own chemical defenses, producing compounds in their leaves that make them less palatable to the incoming insects. It is a slow, quiet chemical conversation, an act of community defense, coordinated through an underground internet of fungus. Now think of the tree of souls. Think of the Navi connecting their neural queue to its tendrils, sharing memories, sharing consciousness, connecting to the wisdom of their ancestors. They are plugging into a biological network that unifies the entire forest. They are participating in the silent, living consciousness of their world. What is this, if not a breathtaking, cinematic interpretation of the mycorrhizal network? The filmmakers of Avatar gave this hidden reality a visible form. They took the quiet, microscopic truth of our own forests, this deep symbiotic connection, this silent sharing of wisdom and resources, and they made it glow. They made it sacred. They showed us that the idea of Eywa is not an alien fantasy. It is a terrestrial fact, happening on a time scale we are too impatient to notice, and on a physical scale we are too large to see. So when we look at the Eastern White Cedar, we are not just looking at a tree, we are looking at a source code. We are seeing a real-world blueprint for one of our most powerful modern myths. We see its ancient twisted form, and we recognize the stoic grandeur of Home Tree. We see the deer taking shelter in its boughs from a winter storm, and we understand the tree as a sanctuary, a cradle for a community. We learn of its name, Arborvitae, and its history as a healer, and we see the truth behind the magic of the Tree of Souls. And when we understand the quiet, fungal conversation happening between its roots and the roots of its neighbors, we feel the pulse of Eywa, the undeniable truth that all life is connected. The gift of a story like Avatar is that it can reawaken our sense of wonder. It can make us look at our own world with new eyes. But the true marvel is not the fiction it created. The true marvel is the reality that inspired it. A reality embodied in a humble, resilient, life-giving tree that has been quietly playing its part for millennia, waiting for us to remember its name and to listen once again to its story. Chapter 6. A Future in the Balance. The Cedar in the Anthropocene. And that story, our story with the cedar, continues to be written, even now. As we pull back from the deep time of geology and the sacred time of myth, we find ourselves in the present moment. Here, in the quiet rustle of our own century, the ancient, slow-running chronicle of the cedar is meeting a new and accelerated pace. For millennia, the tree has been a patient scribe, recording the passage of seasons, the wet years and the dry, the fires and the regrowth, all within the silent library of its rings. But the story being written in the wood today is different. It speaks of a world changing faster than the cedar has ever known, a world reshaped by a single species, our own. To stand beside an old-growth cedar today is to feel that tension. The deep peace of the grove is still there, the air still thick with that sacred citrus and incense perfume. But if we listen closely with the full attention of our senses, we can perceive a subtle strain, a quiet hum of challenge beneath the tranquility. This chapter of the cedar's story is being written in what some call the Anthropocene, the age of humans, and it is a chapter defined by a delicate and uncertain balance. Let's begin by feeling the first and perhaps most profound of these new pressures. It is not an axe, nor a fire, but something far more pervasive and invisible. It is a change in the very air, a subtle shift in the breath of the planet. We call it climate change, a term that feels abstract and immense. But for the Eastern White Cedar, it is deeply personal. It is a slow, relentless turning up of the thermostat. Imagine the cedar's natural range as a vast, comfortable homeland, a band stretching across southeastern Canada and the northeastern United States. This is its sweet spot, a climate zone it has spent thousands of years perfecting its existence within. It understands the rhythm of the seasons here. It knows the depth of the snow, the timing of the spring thaw, the intensity of the summer sun. It is an organism perfectly tuned to this specific climatic song. Now imagine that song is changing. The notes are shifting higher. The tempo is speeding up. The long, slow migration of a forest is a majestic thing to consider. Over centuries, as ice ages came and went, entire forests would move across the continent. Not by walking, of course, but through the patient, generational journey of seeds. A squirrel buries a cone a little further north. A bird carries a seed to a new ridge. A gust of wind deposits a tiny winged seed in a clearing beyond its parent's reach. Generation by generation, over thousands of years, the entire forest breathes its way across the landscape, following the climate it needs to survive. It is a migration measured in inches per year. But the climate of our time is not moving in inches. It is sprinting. The cedar finds itself in a race it is not equipped to run. The southern edge of its range is growing hotter and drier than its ancient memory knows how to handle. The trees here feel the stress in their very core. The summer heat bakes the soil, stealing precious moisture. The winters may be milder, which sounds pleasant, but they can bring less of the insulating snowpack that protects the shallow roots from damaging freeze-thaw cycles. A stressed tree is like a person with a compromised immune system. It becomes vulnerable. Its growth slows, its defenses weaken. It is still standing, still a magnificent presence, but it is living on the edge, struggling to hold on in a home that is slowly becoming foreign. At the same time, the northern edge of its range should, in theory, be opening up. New territories, once too cold, are becoming more hospitable. But the cedar cannot simply pack its bags and move. It is still reliant on the slow, patient dispersal of its seeds, and it must contend with new soils, new competitors, a whole new ecological neighborhood that it must learn to navigate. We are asking a species that operates on a geological timescale to adapt on a human timescale, and it is a profound and daunting request. We are witnessing, in slow motion, the quiet, immense effort of an entire species trying to outrun the weather. As we stand in this warming forest, feeling the silent stress of the trees, let's lower our gaze from the continental scale of climate and focus on the forest floor. Here, another, more immediate pressure is making itself known. It is the gentle, almost silent footfall of the white-tailed deer. The relationship between cedar and deer is an ancient one, a dance of browse and regrowth that has played out for millennia. In the depths of winter, when the snow lies heavy and other food is scarce, the cedar is a lifeline. Its flattened sprays are a source of vital nutrition, a winter pantry that has saved countless generations of deer from starvation. The tree gives, and the deer survives. It is a natural part of the ecosystem. But like the climate, that relationship is now out of balance. In much of the cedar's range, the deer's natural predators, the wolves, the cougars, are gone, or their populations are a fraction of what they once were. Without this top-down pressure, deer populations have exploded, and a healthy, thriving population of deer, in a landscape with fewer and fewer old-growth forests, develops an immense appetite. Walk with me into a cedar forest where the deer population is high. The first thing you might notice is the silence and the light. The forest feels open, park-like. You can see for a long way through the understory. The towering mature cedars are still there, their magnificent trunks rising towards the canopy. But look down. Look for the next generation. Look for the saplings, the teenagers, the young trees that should be filling the space, waiting for their chance at the sun. And you will see nothing. Or rather, you will see a perfectly uniform line, about 5 feet off the ground. Below this line Every cedar branch, every sapling, every shoot has been meticulously clipped away. It is called the browse line. It is as sharp and as clear as a tide mark on a cliff. Below this line is the zone of the deer's reach, and it is a zone of emptiness. The mature trees can survive this pruning, as their main foliage is high above the danger. But for a young cedar just beginning its journey, to be eaten down to a nub year after year is a death sentence. Imagine a city where no children are allowed to grow up. The adults go about their business, they age, they eventually pass away, but there is no one to replace them. This is the reality in many of our cedar groves. The ancient giants are still with us, but they are a generation without heirs. The forest floor has become a nursery of ghosts. The seeds sprout, full of potential, pushing their first tender green shoots out of the duff, and then they are gone. A brief snack for a passing deer. The forest has lost its future tense. The story is being held in the present by the old trees, but the pages for the next chapter are being eaten before the ink can even dry. This isn't the deer's fault. They are not villains. They are simply surviving, playing the part they have always played. But the system is broken. The scale has been tipped, and the weight of this imbalance is falling heaviest on the young. The quiet tragedy of the browse line is one of the most visible and heartbreaking challenges the cedar faces today. It is a silent green stillness, an absence where there should be the chaotic, vibrant promise of new life. And the challenges come at every scale, from the global climate to the large mammal, down to the nearly invisible. Let's shrink our focus once more, until we are looking at a single, beautiful, lace-like spray of cedar. It appears healthy from a distance, a deep and vibrant green. But come closer. Look at the very tips of the individual scale-like leaves. Do you see it? A slight discoloration, a pale yellowish or brownish patch, almost like a tiny burn. This is the work of an insect so small, so secretive, you would likely never notice it. It is the calling card of the cedar leaf miner, a tiny moth with the scientific name Arborvitae Thuja. The adult moth is a sliver of a thing, less than a centimeter long, with silvery white wings. It flits through the cedar groves like a stray fleck of light, a ghost in the foliage. It is not this moth that does the damage, but its children. In the summer, the female lays her eggs, tiny specks of future life, on the green scales of a cedar branch. When a larva hatches, it does something remarkable. It does not chew the leaf from the outside. Instead, it burrows directly into the leaf tissue. It becomes a miner, excavating the living green heart of the leaf from within. Imagine a scribe with a microscopic tool, painstakingly scraping the ink from a single letter on a vast, illuminated manuscript. The larva lives its life between the upper and lower surfaces of the cedar scale, eating the chlorophyll-rich cells, the very machinery of photosynthesis. It is protected from the outside world, hidden from predators as it carves its hollow tunnels. From the outside, the only sign is that gradual sickly browning of the leaf tip as its life force is consumed from the inside out. One leaf miner is of no consequence to a great tree, but when conditions are right, their populations can explode. A tree can become infested with tens of thousands of these tiny miners. The cumulative effect is a slow, creeping fade. The vibrant green of the canopy becomes tinged with a coppery, unhealthy brown. The tree is not being devoured whole, but it is being bled of its vitality, one leaf at a time. It is a death by 1,000 tiny cuts. A healthy cedar, in a balanced ecosystem, can often withstand such an outbreak. It has the reserves to push out new growth and recover. But a tree already stressed by a changing climate, a tree whose offspring are being consumed by deer, is far more vulnerable. These pressures do not exist in isolation. They compound. They are layers of strain, a heavy blanket being laid upon the ancient shoulders of the cedar. The drought-stressed tree is less able to fight off the insect. The forest with no young saplings has no resilience, no ability to bounce back from a die-off of the older generation. It is a complex, interwoven web of challenges, a story of a modern world pressing in on an ancient being. The picture can seem bleak, a tree racing against a changing climate, a forest unable to raise its children, an insidious pest hollowing it out from within. It would be easy to end the story there, on a note of quiet despair, but that is not the whole story. Because the other defining feature of the Anthropocene is not just our capacity for disruption, but also our capacity for awareness, for care, and for dedicated, brilliant action. The story does not end in the silence of the browsed understory, because we are there too, listening, watching, and beginning finally to act. A new chapter of hope is being written, not in wood, but in labs, in community meetings, and in the rich dark soil of restoration sites. There is a quiet, determined, and growing movement of people who have taken on the role of stewards, of guardians for the tree of life. Let's travel first to a place that feels far removed from the deep woods, to a sterile, brightly lit laboratory. Here scientists are peering into the very essence of the cedar, into its genetic code. They are not trying to re-engineer it, but to understand its hidden strengths. They collect samples from across the cedar's vast range, from the hot, humid southern edge to the cold, windswept northern cliffs. They are searching for the survivors, the champions. They are looking for the trees that carry the genetic instructions for resilience. Perhaps one population has a slightly better tolerance for heat. Perhaps another has a natural chemical defense that makes it less palatable to leaf miners. This is a new kind of cartography, mapping the landscape of the cedar's own inner resilience. By understanding this, we can begin to help. This leads to a concept that sounds audacious, but is born of necessity: assisted migration. It is the gentle human-guided process of helping the cedar move faster than it can on its own. It means collecting seeds from a slightly warmer, more southerly region and planting them a little further north, giving the next generation a genetic head start in preparing for the climate that is coming. It is a delicate dance, a partnership with evolution, using our knowledge not to dominate nature, but to give it a helping hand, to help it keep pace with the world we have changed. And then there are the libraries, not of books but of seeds. In quiet, unassuming buildings, in deep freeze vaults, a monumental effort is underway. It is the work of seed banking. Throughout the fall, teams of botanists and volunteers go out into the ancient groves. They climb the great trees or use long pruning hooks to carefully collect the small, delicate cones. It is a race against time and squirrels. Back in the lab, these cones are laid out on drying racks until they open, releasing their precious cargo, the tiny winged seeds. Each seed is a universe of potential. It is a complete blueprint for a future giant, a story waiting for soil and sun. These seeds are carefully cleaned, catalogued, and placed into deep cold storage. They are a backup drive for an entire species. They are an ark, frozen in time, holding the genetic diversity of the cedar safe against an uncertain future. If a local population is lost to disease or disaster, the seeds in the library hold the key to bringing it back. It is one of the most profoundly hopeful acts we can engage in, the quiet, patient, and humble work of saving the seeds. But our modern science, for all its power, is only just beginning to understand the depth of wisdom that has existed on this continent for millennia. And so our journey towards hope must take us to the people who never forgot the cedar's name or its importance. We turn to the indigenous communities, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and others for whom the cedar, Gizik, has always been a sacred relative, not a resource. Here the conversation is not about saving a species, but about honoring a relationship. Traditional ecological knowledge, or tech, is a different kind of science. It is a science of the heart and the spirit, as much as the mind. It is built on thousands of years of direct observation, of lived experience, of stories passed down through generations. It understands the cedar not as an isolated organism, but as a central part of a community of plants, animals, fungi, water, and people. Indigenous-led conservation efforts are healing the land in a way that spreadsheets and data points alone never can. They are reintroducing the idea of reciprocity. You do not just take from the forest, you give back, you offer thanks, you conduct ceremonies. You manage the land with the perspective of 7 generations, thinking of the great-great-grandchildren you will never meet. They are re-establishing cultural practices that have stewarded these lands for longer than any other group. This is not a quaint romantic notion. It is a deeply practical and effective form of land management, rooted in a respect that our modern world is desperately in need of relearning. Listening to and empowering these indigenous voices is not just a part of the solution, it is the very heart of it. It is the act of remembering how to be a good relative to the world. And finally, let's put on our boots and get our hands dirty. The hope for the cedar is not just in freezers and laboratories, it is in the mud, in the sweat, in the quiet, physical act of restoration. All across the cedar's range, groups of people are coming together to heal those silent, browsed-out understories. The simplest and most powerful tool they have is a fence. They build what are called exclosures, large fenced-off areas that the deer cannot enter. The first year, not much seems to happen. But then, the magic begins. The seeds, which have been raining down from the mature trees all along, finally have their chance. The second year, a green carpet of tiny cedar seedlings appears. By the 5th year, it is a thick, chaotic, impenetrable tangle of young trees, a vibrant, thriving forest nursery. To stand at the edge of one of these exclosures is to witness 2 possible futures, side by side. Outside the fence is the silent, open, park-like forest, the browse line a stark reminder of the missing generation. Inside the fence is a riot of life. It is noisy with birds and insects that now have cover. It is a vision of what the forest wants to be. It is a living, breathing diorama of hope. And people are planting. With shovels and buckets of saplings grown in local nurseries, volunteers spend their weekends tucked away in the woods, giving the next generation a start. Each tree planted is an act of defiance against the silence. It is a prayer spoken in the language of soil and roots. It is a promise to the future. It is the slow, hard, and deeply rewarding work of mending a broken connection. So, as we settle into the quiet of the night, we leave the cedar here, in this delicate balance. The threats are real, immense, and undeniable. They are the legacy of our carelessness, the unintended consequences of our own success as a species. The weight of the Anthropocene is heavy, but the response is also real. It is the quiet hum of the freezer in the seed bank. It is the focused gaze of the scientist at the microscope. It is the sound of an elder sharing a story with a child. It is the satisfying thud of a fence post being driven into the ground. It is the gentle touch of hands tucking a seedling into the earth. The story of the Eastern White Cedar is no longer just its own. It has become our story too. It is a story about what we have broken. But more importantly, it is a story about our capacity to heal. The tree that inspired a fictional world's tree of souls asks us a very real question. Will we be the agents of its decline, or will we choose to be its partners in resilience? We don't need to travel to a distant moon to find Eywa. That connection, that great pulsing web of life is right here. It is in the damp, fragrant air of the cedar swamp. It is in the rough, fibrous bark beneath our fingertips. It is in the shared responsibility we feel to protect these living, breathing monuments. The great tree does not ask for much. It only asks that we see it, that we remember its name, and that we lend our hands, our minds and our hearts to ensuring that its ancient, life-giving story continues for generations to come, long after we have all returned to the earth it so faithfully shades. And in that quiet work, we may find that in saving the tree of life, we are also in some small way saving ourselves.